All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Cafe. All right, so today we are going to look at the Kabbalah of fine wine and good steak, right? That's what's at stake this morning. That was way too easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to begin with a Talmudic passage. And the Talmudic passage is quoted in our text. Boker Tov, good morning, good morning. All right, here we go. Let me pull this up. Yoma 76b. Here we go. 1 second. So, friends, there's a lot in the Talmud, a lot of stories, and some of the stories in the Talmud are wild, absolutely wild, and some are tame, and some are, somewhere in between. The story that we're about to read has to do with wine. The Talmud is discussing the various prohibitions about wine in certain contexts. With the Nazarite vow, somebody takes a vow not to drink wine, obviously, then that would be prohibited. Let's see. See if I can find the original quote here. There is a rabbi in the Talmud who's quoted as saying that wine helps make one smart. Let's see if I can find this. Hold on. By the way, wine is a complicated thing, right? We know this. Why is wine complicated? It says one of the opinions as to what the Chet Eitz Hadat was, the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? Was that it was actually they drank wine. It was grapes, they made it into wine, and they drank wine, and that was the forbidden fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What makes wine sacred?
What makes it
Where does that come from?
what makes it a something that you use for like for ritual things? Look, there are verses that say that wine, the yayin, King David writes in Psalms, the yayin yisamach levav enosh, that wine makes the heart of human beings happy. Studies show, right? Anecdotal evidence shows. And so when we're engaged in a simcha, when we're engaged in some sort of something like that, the tradition is that we say a blessing over wine to help infuse joy, even physical joy, into the celebration. Whether it's a celebration that celebrates like a physical milestone, like a brit milah, or a wedding, right? These types of things are always involve a cup, or kiddush Friday night, spiritual commemoration. There's typically wine. Anyway, I can't find the exact quote in the Talmud. And the truth is, I'm looking at a footnote over here. It says that it's according to one version, that's the version anyway. So maybe it's not going to be directly in the Talmud, but I'll tell you what the quote says. We're going to get to it today. It says, wine and the aroma of wine stimulate the intellect. So if you want to get your intelligence, right? If you want to become a little, if you want to pique your intelligence, a little bit of wine. So say the French rabbis. Kidding, right? A little bit of wine. A little bit of wine can stimulate the intellect. I think many of us connect wine with like sophistication. No, sophistication, glass of wine, right? Discussing, pondering the secrets of the universe over a glass of wine. So in the Talmud, according to one version, it says wine and aroma stimulate the intellect. There's another story in the Talmud, and the story goes that one rabbi asked another rabbi a question. Or maybe, I think the students asked their teacher, the rabbi, a question. And he said, I don't know the answer. And then later on that day, he gave them the answer. And he said the reason why I didn't give you the answer earlier is because I didn't yet eat meat. Once I ate meat, I was able to give you the answer. What he says. He didn't have his steak and eggs or whatever it was. And the exact quote here is, let's see if I can find it now that I closed it. Ad lo achilna bisra de Torah, not Torah like we know, but Aramaic. Lo tsalina daitai. Until I partook of some ox's meat, my mind was not clear. That's what he says. So what does that mean? Wine stimulates the intellect. The mind is not clear until you eat meat. What does it mean? So it touches on a larger question. The larger question, and this is a question asked in Kabbalah, as wild as it may sound, is why do we eat? And I know what you're thinking, because we need to eat. What do you mean, why do we eat? We need to eat. Slow it down. The Kabbalists framed the question the following way. You know, there's a hierarchy in creation or in existence. There is what philosophers call a taxonomy of things, of creatures on Earth. And there are, in science, 3 different levels of this taxonomy. In Judaism, we have 4. And here's what they are. Domem, Someach, Chai, Medaber. Inanimate objects, vegetation, animals, and then Judaism says humans. In science, they say humans are also animals, more evolved animals, but nonetheless the animal category. Judaism, Kabbalah certainly differentiates out the human being from animals. And so we have 4 classifications of life. The lowest class of life, as it were, inanimate objects, the earth outside. Why is it the lowest? Well, first of all, it's literally the lowest. Literally the lowest. Everyone steps on it. Imagine, God forbid, if you and I were stepped on all day. Slightly uncomfortable, at least for me, right? The earth, everyone's walking on the earth the whole day. It doesn't move, it doesn't grow, it doesn't exhibit or display any signs outwardly, any signs of life. It looks dead and unmoving. To the point that when the Arizal, the great Kabbalist Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, lived in the 1500s, when he says that even an Even Domem, even a still and silent rock, has a nefesh, has a soul, everyone's like, are you sure? What do you mean by soul? What kind of soul? Does it really have a soul? And we've spoken about this in previous classes. Yes, even a stone has a soul. But the reason why that's like astonishing is because domem does not, inanimate objects, life, does not exhibit any signs. They don't have any signs of life yet.
I'm just thinking about that. If we go by that stones have also a soul, and like when kids are in the playground and they're skipping stones around or whatever, is there any provision of doing that? I mean, like you just something for no reason, but entertainment, I guess.
Yes. Hold that question, and I'm gonna circle back to it. Short answer is there might be. A very definitive possible. All right, but hold on. Then you have above that is vegetation, literally and also conceptually. Vegetation does show signs of life. It grows, right? It's not walking around, right? Your tree is not moving around your yard, but it grows. It starts off small, it gets larger, it changes colors. You know, you look outside and the trees are crystal. It's gorgeous. It's like, wow, we live in like an ice garden. It's so cool. I know. For anyone who spent time in other parts of the country, it's normal. I was thinking about this, like my kids, my older kids have all gone through yeshiva in Chicago. And now my second kid is now in yeshiva in Toronto. And it's like the whole, like I was telling Leah, we were walking home from shul yesterday. It was fine. And I'm like, our kids have been doing this for years at a time. Like literally years of like navigating this, just, it being a part of the reality of navigating the cold and the ice and the snow and the slush Do I walk in the sidewalk? Do I walk in the street next to the sidewalk? Just that whole thing that we typically don't have to think about here. Anyway, I was feeling a little bit of compassion for them as I was walking yesterday. But back to the story. So vegetation grows above the earth, above inanimate, and it's not inanimate. It's animated. It moves. It looks alive, and it has a soul. So it is above domim. It is a class or a classification of life above inanimate objects. Above that are animals. Animals don't just grow from small to big. Oh, look at that baby tiger cub that grows into this huge tiger. Maybe it was a bad idea to, have it in my house, right? So not only do animals grow from small to big, but they also move around, and they also exhibit emotion. They also exhibit intelligence, right? Animals possess a very different and more elevated form expression of life than does vegetation, and human beings rise above animals in our ability to have creative intelligence and ability to communicate, etc. Great.
Right.
Yes.
Explain the vegetation that actually in the brain.
Still growing. It's still exhibiting life. Yeah, and it's nurturing from. But that leads to a question. All of this is like, we've talked about it before in other classes. All this is fairly straightforward. But here's the kicker. The kicker is, one second. Typically, the way things work when you have mashpia and mekabel, giver, receiver, is the giver is standing above the receiver. Right? The giver has something that the receiver, the recipient, does not have. Does that make sense? Right? It's like a teacher and a student. The teacher has the information, the student needs the information. Great. So the teacher has. So typically, if you were to create a hierarchical chart, you would say the one giving is on top of the one receiving. You would say typically. And yet we find something crazy. The earth is feeding the vegetation. The vegetation are feeding the animals. And the animals are feeding the humans if you choose to eat meat. But either way, it's always driven from the bottom up. So what's going on? So let me frame this as the Kabbalists frame the question. Why is it that when a person needs energy, they need to turn to something lower than ourselves? Why do we turn to something beneath ourselves to derive energy? Typically, you would look to something greater than you to derive energy. Why something lower than you? And if you say, continue the Kabbalists, that somehow there's an energy inside the ground or inside the vegetation or inside the animal, that there's a spark, there's a soul, there's spiritual energy there, great. But don't we have spiritual energy? And isn't our energy greater than their energy in this hierarchy? And if so, why does our energy need an inferior energy? It would make sense that you need a superior energy, not an inferior energy. So what's going on? Understand the question? So here's the answer. The answer is that the premise of the question is mistaken. The premise of the question is that these lower forms of life are lower. Well, who said? Because they look lower? Because they appear lower? That's all what I like to call, as I'm coining this expression today, I like to call this the funhouse mirror of reality, which means maybe not so funhouse. Like when you have a mirror, let me think how this works. The thing that is, let's think. Let's say I have a bunch of items on this table, and I put up a mirror right over here. Let's say I start here, right? This is going to be the biggest. Wait, let me think. Yeah, so whatever's first here in the mirror is going to look last. Yes? Do I have this right in my head?
Right.
Yeah? And whatever's last is first. Right?
Right.
My example may make it more complicated. But hey, that's also part of the fun. So here's what's going on. In the scheme of creation, but really not really the scheme of creation, in the behind the scenes of creation. So everything that exists has a source above. The source of animal life, vegetation, life, and inanimate items, inanimate life, are actually higher than the source of, and in one aspect, higher than the source of the human being. It's just that as it is in the world or in the spectrum of revelation, Gilui, as it's manifest, it's lower. But what's lower is actually really higher in Shoresh, in source. Again, kind of like that mirror, that whatever's highest appears lowest. Or like, I don't know, if you draw a painting, like Bob Ross would sometimes. Remember Bob Ross? Happy trees. How do you have a lake? You have a lake painting, and the lake has the shadows of the forest, right? The top of the trees, the highest part of the trees, are now the lowest part of the reflection. Just the way it is. The highest in Shoresh, the highest in source, comes out. The way it comes out is the lowest, right? It's almost like this swing, right? Here's the pivot, right? The highest swings to the lowest. Stuff in the middle is the stuff in the middle. And so the mystics tell us that the source of inanimate life, the source of vegetation, the source of even animals are actually, on one level, they're higher than that of the human being. How so? So this gets into the mystery of the world of Tohu, the world of chaos. Again, another topic that we've explored before. So it's important to touch on this morning, but we'll do it very quickly. The mystics tell us that before the world of Tikkun, the world of repair, which is the world that we live in, there was a realm called Tohu. Like Tohu Vavo, in the beginning, the world was chaotic and void. So Tohu, the world of chaos. What is the world of chaos? It's a space where the energy, the divine light, was so powerful, it was too powerful to be contained in the vessels that typically contain the light. And thus, the vessel shattered, Shvirat HaKelim, the vessel shattered, and it was an unsustainable realm. That energy, that power of Olam HaTohu, of the world of chaos, where the lights are very large and the vessels are too small. So that energy is manifest, or that is the source of all of the lower forms of life, what we consider to be lower forms of life in our reality, in our world. All of the lower things, animals, plants, inanimate life, they're all actually rooted in the highest spiritual realm, in the realm of Tohu. That's even higher than the realm of Tikkun, where we come from. Now, what does that mean? It means very simply, it means that even as we think that we are the king of, the king of the jungle, as it were, even as we think that we are the ones that are shaping reality, and in many aspects we do, part of the responsibility of that is recognizing the power that's latent in the things that we might otherwise discard and think are not so valuable, not so important, not so valuable. Recognize that they too have not just a soul, but a soul that might be even on one level loftier than our own. This is why we need to eat. It's not just to gain energy, because the question could be asked, we have our own energy, we have our own soul. I need to consume the soul of lettuce. Why do I need lettuce? Right? Lettuce shouldn't eat me. What do I need lettuce for? I need an energy that's lower than me? No, that lettuce contains an energy that's higher than me. That's why I need it. This creates, first of all, this completely reframes our entire approach to eating. Eating is not simply fulfilling our appetite or even simply giving ourselves calories and energy with which that we can go about our day and do what we need to do. Eating is more precisely tapping into an energy that's greater than ours, that is embedded, that is almost locked away in something that is lower than us. So the thing itself might be lower than us, but its energy comes from a source that's higher than us. And by eating, we're actually feeding our body and our soul with something with a greater energy. The truth is, you don't need Kabbalah for this. The Torah says it. Ki lo ala lechem levado yichya adam. Ki al kol motze pi Hashem yichya adam. Because man does not live by bread alone, rather by the utterance of God's mouth does man live. What does that mean? The utterance of God's mouth. The divine energy that's in the food. It's not the food that gives us energy. It's the divine energy in the food that gives us energy. And that divine energy in the food is actually higher than our own. Does that make sense?
Need energy for food. That's it.
Correct. We actually need a boost. How can a piece of sushi give us a boost? Because it comes from Tohu. I only come from Tikkun. It down here comes from a higher source. You know what they say? The bigger you are, the harder you fall. The higher the energy, the lower it goes. It's like a wall. Another example that's found in Kabbalah is not Bob Ross's paintings, but a stone wall that falls. The stones that are the furthest away were the ones on the top of the wall. Correct? If a stone wall collapses, it's the stones on top of the wall that will be the furthest away from the base from where that wall used to be. So look at the lowest of the low, and there you'll find the greatest sparks, the greatest divine energy. And so, yes, it's kind of like the food is doing us a favor. I mean, isn't that what's actually happening? That we're able to tap into lofty spiritual light that is so chaotic that the only way it can show up is shrouded in something that appears to be lowly. You don't? Listen. First of all, we do eat inanimate. Water is part of the world of domain of inanimate life. Water doesn't grow. You put water in a cup. My tea is not growing. Well, if I leave it out long enough, it might grow something. It's growing cold, exactly. Something, it might be growing something. No, so water, we do eat. By virtue of eating everything else that we eat, it's all being nurtured by the soil. Look, no plant, well, that's not true. Hydroponic, right? I don't know how that works. Oh, how does that, it works with water.
Yeah.
Still inanimate. Still everything every vegetation is being powered by, not Intel. Those were the old computers. Remember that? Used to buy them, used to have stickers all over the front. So I bought a computer and I have to peel off stickers. Do I peel them off? Do I not peel them off? Anyone ever had that existential crisis? Do I peel off powered by Intel? Right? Running Windows 95, whatever it was, like, oh, I've never done. No, I wouldn't even ask that question. That seems like the self-destruct button. I do not even want to know what happens if you actually rip off that label. But like everything that grows, like all of vegetation, it's all being nurtured by inanimate life, whether it's soil, water, a combination of the two, etc. And then you have animals. Which animal doesn't eat? Well, it's no longer alive, it doesn't eat. Every animal needs to eat. And what's it eating? Vegetation, by and large, right? The animals that we eat aren't eating other animals. Except for fish, I guess. Right? What does gefilte fish eat? Carrots. Oh, gosh. No. Oh, no. How's that kosher? All right. Yeah, makes sense? Yeah.
When you do a blessing on something, isn't it part of it is to bring the sparks out of a cup of water and elevate it?
Yeah.
So how that, like, if you actually are the one that's, by saying a blessing, elevating it, then how is it that it's already elevated more than you?
Oh.
So like, there is a contradiction in it.
Good question. So that's where the duality of etzem and gilui, or shoresh and hishtalshalut, depending on how you want to refer to it, comes in. I'm using a lot of Hebrew words. Let me explain. They're the way things are in truth, and then there's the way things are practically. The way things are practically is we're at the top, and then animals, and then vegetation, and then inanimate, and that's the way things are practically in our reality. The way things are in truth is that the lowest has energy that's really the highest. But the way it's manifest is it's not visible, it's not seen, it's not actualized, etc., until you and I come along and pull it out. So we are almost, we were speaking before about this, right? We are almost like the shadchanim. We're the matchmakers, reconnecting, right, the spark with the source. We're reconnecting the energy visibly with its true space, true place, true source above. How do we have that energy? Because we are from the world of tikkun, we're from the world of repair. In other words, we are fix-it people. That's our job. Yes. Now, all of this sounds like mystical and Kabbalistic. Again, all of this is straight up Torah. God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden, la'avda u'lashamra, to work it and to guard it. Right? And God says, you are going to rule over all of life. What does that mean? Be a dictator? To destroy it? No. To be a kind ruler. To be the one to elevate it, to guide it. A ruler, a leader, ideally, should be the one guiding it to its destiny. So our job is to guide everything to its destiny. Now, last week I explained that in truth, everything in the world is connected to its source. Today, I'm adding this idea that the things that appear to be the lowest actually have an even higher source than us sometimes. So everything is connected, but again, the question is, do we see the connection? Is it visible? Last week, I explained that the only space in which God isn't is in our own perception. It's only in those spaces in which we choose or in which we somehow objectively don't see God. If we see God, if we perceive God, then God is everywhere. But it's kind of like, do I just perceive it? I'm like, wow, I've attained enlightenment. Let me go back to bed. Or do I say, I perceive it. I see this reality. I'm going to relate to everything around me as though it has this divine energy within it. And therefore, as I eat, I say a bracha, I say a blessing. And the blessing acknowledges not only that this item, this food item, is coming from God and is a gift from God to me to consume, right? By acknowledging that God is the one who created everything that grows from the earth, who created everything around me, etc., and all the food that we eat. Not only is it acknowledgement that food belongs to God, it's a meditation to keep us focused on the in a reverential way. Reverential, did I say that right? Reverence, with reverence for what we're about to do. So we don't take what we're doing lightly. We're not just eating, we are elevating. And although you can ask the question from last week's class and say, one second, are we really elevating? Or is it always connected? Are we only elevating in our mind because now we're connecting the dots, but those dots were always connected? There is something that objectively is happening in the real world as well. And that is that something is being utilized for its intended purpose. In other words, it's not just that essentially the animal is connected with God, i.e. it's possessing energy from the world of Tohu, which it does, but it's being treated as such, and that objectively elevates the world around us. There's a phrase that we're going to encounter today, Gam et haolam natan b'libo shel adam. The world too was placed in the heart of human beings. What does that mean? The way we relate to the world, the way we treat the world, actually affects the world, and not only our world, but all the worlds. And so this becomes the task. This becomes the challenge. Think of this as a reality show, right? Life is one big, before reality TV, God created the first reality show. What's the reality show? Can you take the stuff around you, perceive it as connected, and then treat it and act toward it as though it were connected? You do that. That's the reality show. Can you find the light? Can you find the sparks in everything around you? And can you treat it as such? You see, again, just to connect last week and this week, to perceive it in your mind as everything is connected, everything is godly, the table is godly, the animal is godly, the leaf is godly, the tree, the rocks outside, your question, which I'm going to go back to in a second, are godly. That's one thing, it's in your head. But it's another thing to behave toward that thing like that perception, in consistent with that perception. It's kind of like, I love somebody, great, but do I treat them with love? Say, no, I love you, but I'm not going to talk to you. Hold on one second. If I really love you, I'm going to treat you with love. If I respect you, I'll treat you with respect. If I value, if I truly perceive the lofty divine energy in the piece of meat, I'm going to say a bracha, and I'm going to eat it with the right mindfulness. I'm going to engage with it in a different way. I'm not just consuming it, I'm elevating it. And it's an honor for me to be given the opportunity to elevate something, or to reconnect something, or to treat it in a way that's something that's actually even on some level higher than myself. That's an honor. It's an honor to have this opportunity. And so the way I engage in everything around me is radically different.
So eat more meat, you get to a higher level. Or you eat
So getting back to the Talmudic phrase, okay? So one rabbi said, wine and its aroma makes you clever. What does that mean? The wine, not only the wine makes you clever, the energy in the wine. I couldn't answer the question because I hadn't yet had breakfast. I hadn't yet had my steak and eggs, right? Ada lo yechilna bisra the Torah, until I had, tough in Aramaic is like a shin, sure. Until I had the meat of an ox, i.e. beef. I couldn't think straight to answer your question. What does that mean? How could it be that the human mind can't function without breakfast? Why not? Today we would say without a coffee. Like why not? How does the coffee have that power? Yeah, you could break it down chemically, I'm sure. But spiritually, it's because it contains, or using the exact reference of the Talmud, the ox, the animal, the cow, whatever it is, contains an energy that you and I don't possess. And if not for that energy, we wouldn't. Our minds are not as sharp. There is another phrase not brought in our text, but another phrase. I don't know where it originates. Maybe also from the Talmud, and it says something to the extent that until a child tastes grain, eats grain, like grain products, a child can't speak. Child doesn't know to say Abba, to say father, until it tastes some dagan. What's dagan? Corn, grain. So it has grain, doesn't know to call Abba. This is not a commercial for Gerber's baby food or whatever it is, whatever that stuff is made of. The point is, there's something about a more sophisticated diet. One second. Let's temper. Right. There's something about introducing a child to solid foods that then stimulates the intellect for the next stage of development. And there's an association with food and this thing. And we see this in our own lives. It's brought down in the sources. And the reason for this is because of the energy. It all goes back to perception. Are we even thinking about any of this? As opposed to saying, I'm hungry, there's food, let's eat. Do we look at the bagels, the cream cheese and the lox, and the oranges, whatever we have here? Do we say, it's food? Or do we say, look at how much energy that has? Not just calorie energy, but spiritual energy. Energy that on some level is even higher than my own energy, which is why I need it, which is why it can lift me up. Not only do I lift it up, it lifts me up. As I'm lifting it up, it lifts me up. So to go back to your question. So the previous Rebbe, who passed away in 1950, so he shared, his yahrzeit coming up on the 10th of Shvat, a little less than a month. So he shared a story that when he was a child, his father was telling him about the fact that, God is in control of everything, and everything is by divine, everything that happens is by divine providence, which means God is intentionally guiding everything that happens. Even when a leaf, when the wind blows, which direction it blows, how it blows, the wind causes a leaf to disconnect from the branch, from the tree, and flutter to the ground. All of that is divinely guided and divine and intentional, highly intentional. And it's not only that it's intentional, it's part of the master plan of creation. And as he's telling his son this, so this is the previous Rebbe's father. So as the father is telling the son this, so they're walking kind of in the forest. His son takes off a leaf from a branch and starts ripping it up. You know, as kids do. His father says to him, we're just talking about how everything is divinely intended and everything has purpose and everything has value and everything has meaning. And now you're mindlessly ripping, taking something, disconnecting it from its source of life and ripping it up. That was his way of telling the son that wasn't a good thing to do. Not only is it what we would call bal tashchit, which means destroying something for no purpose, for no utility, which we're not allowed to do. There's a biblical prohibition against destroying anything in our natural world without utility, right? In other words, like wanton destruction is not okay.
So how is that not God's intention?
Because you can't play God like that. A person can't hold a gun and say, I'm God's messenger. That would be homicide. You can't play God like that. You're asking a good question though. Why not? Because the moment I did it, right? The moment someone does it, right? You could then say, well, there you go. Divine God's plan. Don't hold me accountable. The philosophical way to address that is to say that, again, first of all, you can't play God. That's not your attachment to say, like, it can't be your calculation to say that I'm going to be the one to decide what God wants, how God wants it, when God wants it, through whom God wants it. And so therefore I'm going to be the messenger. That's one thing. Second point, which I just alluded to also, is if something needs to happen to someone else, or if something needs to happen to something, who says I have to be the one to do it? In other words, like in Tanya, the author of Tanya, the author of the founder of Chabad, writes the following. He says like this. He says that when he's trying to help break kind of like a sadness or a victim mentality within people. He says if something negative happens to us, we could become despondent, we could despair, we could say, why me? We can fall to a posture of victimhood and get stuck in that. And no one's gone through life unscathed. We've all had things happen to us that were not pleasant, whether from God, acts of God, so to speak, or whether from other human beings. And it doesn't feel good. And yet we would ourselves probably say that it's better, if we had the choice, it's better to move forward and grow stronger from that, right? Well, the question is, how do we do that? The author gives us one meditation. He says, look this. The fact that happened to you, that was destined on high. In other words, that had to happen, that's destined. So in other words, part of your journey, which means embrace it, accept it, right? What's the 5 stages of grief? What's the last stage? Right? Acceptance. Accept it. This is the truest thing I can say is, this is my story, because it literally is my story. This is what happened to me. This is part of who I am. So say that. At the same time, that doesn't let that person off the hook, because we ask that person, who told you to be the one to do that, right? Who appointed you the one to do that? You chose with your own free choice to do that. So now you're in trouble. That it happened to me, God, that's divinely ordained. But that person did it to me, that's on them. You with me on this? This is why the Egyptians are punished, even though God had foretold Abraham that they would be enslaved. The Egyptians could have said, God, you twisted our arm. You had determined, you had predestined that the Jewish people would be enslaved in a foreign land. If you don't know what I'm referring to, God speaks to Abraham at the Brit Bein HaBetarim, at the covenant of the parts. God says to Abraham that your children, your descendants will be a slave in a foreign land, in a land that's not theirs, and they'll be subjugated, etc., and pained. And afterwards, they're going to go out, Baruch Gadol, with great wealth. That's what he tells him. He tells him basically, Allah is going to be great. So imagine, hundreds of years later, as we're about to enter the book of Exodus, imagine the Egyptians would say, why are you punishing us for enslaving the Jewish people? We had to. God had already predetermined that this was going to happen. What choice did we have? So we tell the Egyptian, my fellow, the Egyptians had to enslave the Jewish people. But who said you had to be involved? Who said you had to take the whip and beat the Jew? Who said that you had to raise your hand and say, I'm going to be part of this campaign?
So God determines things on a macro level, not on a micro level.
In other words, that something is going to happen macro level, but that you're participating in it, that's free choice. That's not the only way to understand. That's one way to understand. So again, even within individuals, that the thing had to happen to me, I can accept that, if it's part of my story, it was part of my script. But that doesn't let the person that perpetrated that thing, doesn't let them off the hook. Right? Who said they had to be the one? God could have used any number of means to bring that into my reality. The fact that they were the willing participants in that means that they have to face the music. Why do we get here? I don't remember. We got here, yeah.
So you're showing things that are negative and also be the opposite, not positive. Somebody saved somebody's life.
For sure. And you're the one. So they were destined to be saved. You're the one that jumped in. That's to your credit. Correct.
Because we're talking about the rock and destroying the rock and elevating it, and like what God, purpose is. So going back to the rock, I understand, when you talk about the leaf, there's a baltashrit. But when a kid is standing in front of a river, there is a rock, and he skips it from the water. Like, what do we do here? I mean, are we telling the kid, don't do it, don't disturb the rocks? God's purpose was for them to be here. Or maybe God's purpose was for him to skip it on the river.
With regard to animals,
right, there is definitely laws.
With regard to vegetation, there's dozens of laws about not harming, cruelty to animals, against that in Torah. When it comes to vegetation, also the story that I told. Oh, so thank you for bringing me back on track. I have not seen that apply to now. If it's about destroying the earth, that would be problematic. If it's about taking a stone and skipping it on a lake, I haven't seen that. If it's about taking sand and making a sandcastle out of it, like who are we to disturb that? That seems pretty innocuous, unless it's destroying. Because remember, the life of a stone is different than the life of a plant. If I just pull something out of the ground, I have now killed it, essentially. As opposed to if I take a stone, it anyway wasn't connected in that way to space. Now there's another question. If I move a stone, maybe something was living under it or hiding under it and whatever. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but you're asking a question. I'm not sure.
The whole concept of an neshama for a domain, for something that is...
It's wild.
It's
wild.
Hard to comprehend because you deal with those things on a daily basis. You step on them, you move them aside when they bother you. You never think about the rock or the sand when you're at the beach or whatever.
Do you know the Rebbe writes in Hayom Yom, which is the daily thought for the day, which makes sense because it's daily. So he says that when Mashiach comes, the stones are going to say, stones are going to start speaking. The earth, the ground. And they're going to say, I forget the expression, but you fool, what gave you the right to step on me all these years? Unless we were thinking words of Torah. If we had a higher intention, we spoke about a higher intention when we eat, but even when we walk on the ground, we should have in our minds, something Torah related, something of meaning and inspiration. Anyway, all right, let's jump inside. Let's do some learning inside. We have a few pages to conclude chapter 2 of our text, which I think is pretty much what we have here in the booklet. The book is actually out of print. So right now, this is what we got. All right, we are on page. Let me find this. Order of return. Here we go. All right. Okay, here we go. I think we're on maybe 56. Yeah, does that seem right? But I think I want to go back. No, do I want to go back? Hold on. I'm going to tell you where we're going to start. Because I think we haven't done learning inside for a few weeks. So it's kind of, sometimes it's hard to remember. Okay, here's where I want to start. I want to go back to page 52. And I think we're further, even maybe 2 pages further, but I want to get a running start. And the goal now of the next 15 minutes is to finish chapter 2. So we're going to cover a little bit of what we've done before, and we're going to cover what we did today, and we're going to round things out. So again, page 52, right in the middle of the page where it says, loving God, for he is your life. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I'm again on a hotspot here, guys. Everybody online, first of all, it's great to see you guys. Please bear with me. If it's jittery, then I'm gonna close it. But if it's stable, then we're good. All right, let's do this. It looks pretty stable right now. Now, when a person contemplates all of this, how within every entity there is the godly light and life force, that means within everything in creation. The godly light being its primary component, and that created beings are truly subordinated to the godly light within them and to their source that animates them. So he will become awakened with a desire, a yearning, an immense love for godliness to the point where his desires and aspirations will be focused exclusively on godliness. What he's suggesting here is, if you have, utilizing the language of the Matrix, if you take what I believe is the red pill, I think the blue pill was life goes back as normal. If you take the red pill and you see the Matrix and everything, you see the code, once you see that, how do you go back to like looking at everything superficially? You can't look at it superficially. You realize that everything around you is divine, it's godly. And what do you want? I don't want the surface, I want the inside. I want the truth. I want to see the core. I want to connect with the core. That's what he says. When a person recognizes, when a person realizes this, when you have this kind of epiphany, then emotionally you'll be awakened with a desire, a yearning, and a love for godliness. You'll want the inside, which in this context is not green code, a la Matrix. It is divine light, divine energy. Back inside. The peripheral and physical elements of this world will hold no interest for him. I don't want the outside, since they are inherently death, temporal and deteriorative, which is a fancy way of saying they deteriorate. The godly life force will be his only desire, as it is the primary element of existence. Last 2 lines, last paragraph in 52. Certainly upon pondering the above, a person will realize that he is not, listen to this line, to separate material objects from the godly life force that animates them. In other words, don't be the one that uses something in a completely disconnected manner. You know what that means? Don't eat food without the higher intention. You guys are missing a page. What? All right, well then, legit. Oh yeah. Huh. I don't know how that happened. Okay. So then you'll have to just follow along in your mind's eye. So he says like this, certainly you'll if the moment you recognize that there's a deeper truth, you'll want to connect with that deeper truth. And certainly you won't want to deal with something or to engage with it only on the outside, which will separate it from its source. I feel like that wasn't clear enough. What happens when we utilize something just for its material benefit and not for its spiritual, not for the spiritual stuff of the inside? We are acting toward it as though it were disconnected from its spiritual source. And in that way, since we almost affect and shape reality, so our interaction with the thing separates it from its own truth, from its own soul. If we treat it like an object devoid of godliness, then we are separating it from its godly source, from the spark that's inside it. For as explained above, back inside 54, which you don't have here, as explained above, the physical is really subordinated to the godly light and life force. Should he, the person, attribute significance to the material facet of an object, however, by desiring to enjoy the physical element of the material object, he thus debases the object and separates it from its godly life force. It's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing that we have the power to affirm that relationship that the thing has with its source, or to sunder, to break that association by utilizing it only for the material, for the physical, and not by treating it as an object of material, a material object, as opposed to a divine object. Now, how does a person have that power to either elevate or debase the world around us? A person has this power since God also instilled the world in man's heart. That's the quote. That's what I quoted before. The sin involving the tree of knowledge therefore precipitated an all-encompassing macrocosmic dichotomy. What he says is, what happened when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? What happened was they were eating purely for material pleasure. Eve saw that nechmad le'einayim, that it was good, it was delectable to her eyes, and it looked delicious, and so she ate it. And then she gave Adam, and he ate it. They ate only for physical gratification. They didn't eat based on divine intent because God had told them not to eat it. So they only ate it based on their own physical appetite. So that actually created a dichotomy, a split in the world itself between material and spiritual, right? Within that tree, to use it as an object, a physical object, as opposed to something of purpose and meaning, connected, tethered with God's reality, is to separate it. It's almost to divide it in half between soul and body.
One person treats another person as an object. The person is being treated as an object. Do they lose their?
They don't lose it, but you feel like that. You feel objectified. No, it doesn't actually, like, it's not like your soul is somehow compromised, but you feel that hurt. You feel that break. Somebody doesn't see the truth of who you are, only sees you for whatever they want from you. Doesn't feel good. And so what we're saying is, when we do that to the world around us, it doesn't make the world feel good. On the contrary, it creates a dichotomy. Similarly, on a microcosmic level, he continues, by desiring to derive pleasure from the physical element itself, a person separates the object from its godly life force. By the way, I don't know that he means that it's a permanent separation. I think in that moment you're separating, which is similar to a person. In the moment, the person feels used, right? Doesn't mean that they've lost their spiritual connection. Their soul has been, God forbid. No, but it means in that moment, there's a separation there's a breach that's happened. By contrast, on a positive level, when one seeks the godliness of a physical object, i.e. when we eat food and we have the intention that there's a divine energy that I need because it's higher than me, and I'm the one that's been granted the opportunity to reconnect it in a visible way back to its source, etc. So when one seeks the godliness of a physical object, one elevates the object, rendering its essential subservience clearly visible, and that's what I've been alluding to this morning. In other words, it essentially is connected, but when I use it for that higher purpose, or when I have that deeper intention in mind, I make that clearly visible. In other words, now it's obvious to all that it's connected. Hence the verse, to love the Lord your God, for he is your life. Loving Hashem, ki hu chayecha, because he is your life. This is like a person who loves the life of his soul because he senses within himself that the primary element of his existence is the vitality of the soul. In other words, if you love the life of your soul, it's because I recognize that my body is not the source of life. My body is only alive because of the soul. I therefore love the soul. For it is this reason that he loves the soul. For in reality, a person's self-love is not an expression of the fact that he loves his own flesh and blood, but rather an expression of the fact that he loves his soul and wants his soul's vitality to be extended and revealed. In other words, when a person speaks of self-love, what do you love about yourself? Your bones? It's not alive. Your bones are only moving because you have a soul. So when you talk about self-love, which part of self do you love? If you really think about it, it's your soul. The same is true of godliness, to love the Lord your God, for he is your life. When one contemplates how godliness is, 56, Now we're all back together. The source of all life, since the vitality of the world and all of the creation stem from godliness and is a primary element of existence, one will yearn for God and love him. So this meditation that starts from within, meditating on who I am. I am a body and a soul, but my soul is primary. My body is secondary. My soul is giving life to my body. And therefore, what I really love is my soul and not my body. Even if I think I love my body, I really love my soul who's enlivening my body, because without my soul, my body doesn't even exist. It deteriorates, it disintegrates in the earth. So my soul is really what I love, even though I think I love my body. I really love my soul. Apply that to the larger body of the universe. What do I really love? I love tea. I love bagels. No, I love the energy in the tea and the bagels. I love the life force within it. That's a complete game changer. Walk around with that mindset, and suddenly everything is holy, everything is godly. Can't say holy. Everything is godly, everything is divine, everything has a purpose. And now you'll start treating it as such. You'll treat it as divine. You'll treat it as holy. You'll treat it as sacred, as opposed to an object, a physical object to be used. You treat it with dignity, you treat it with respect, and treat it with reverence. Make sense? Practical application.
Was that in the first sentence of the Shema?
Yes,
Does it say that?
he's getting there. Stay with me. He's going to round this out with this. This is the meaning of loving Hashem b'chal levavcha, with all your heart. He's going to say this is that. This means, but let's keep it on practical application. This means that and here now gives physical examples that I've given, but of course I got it from here. This means that while engaged in all worldly activities such as eating and drinking, which we spoke about today, doing business, which we spoke about last week, and the like, a person will not want the physical element of the object or action, but the godliness therein. In other words, one's intent in engaging in physical affairs should be solely to energize his Torah study and prayer, as the saying, as I quoted before, wine and aroma stimulate the intellect. And until I partook of some ox's meat, my mind was not clear. One's motive for eating and drinking should be to enable him to study and pray. Automatically, then, he will be careful to abstain from anything superfluous to him. That means extra, unnecessary. Anything that serves only to gratify his cravings. And since one desires only godliness, to engage in physical pursuits simply for the sake of heaven, as explained above, he is therefore satisfied with what is absolutely necessary. And this ties into it a definition of holiness that I mentioned at the beginning of last week's class, the idea of kadesh atzmecha b'muterlach, which means to sanctify yourself. You want a copy? Sanctify yourself within the realm of permissible. It might be permissible, but do you need it? Is it necessary for your divine service? Or is it extra? Mutar, permitted, has the same letters as, I don't know how to pronounce it, motar. I would say extra. Yoter. But like masaros or motrot. Mutarot. So same word mutar. Could either mean permitted or extra. And so that becomes the question. The things that are forbidden, they're off the table. I'm not going to do it. The things that are permitted, I still have to now. It's like I said last week. That's what the Ramban says. After the Torah tells you, here's your dinner plate, divide it. This is okay. This is not okay, right? Torah has no problem legislating kosher, right? Here's your dinner plate, cut a line through it. This is not good. Great. The very next parsha begins, Kadoshim to you. Be holy. What does that mean? Remember that side that we said was fine? Draw another line there. Even in the realm of permitted, draw another line between what you need and what you don't need. What you need to elevate, what you need for your own divine service, and what's unnecessary. Because what's unnecessary, so why are you engaging it? Only because of the physical? Then you're lobotomizing it. You're creating a dichotomy. You're creating a split between it and its purpose. You are almost forcing it. You're twisting its arm to be separated, or to act in a way, or to be expressed in a way that's separate from its source. You have an opportunity to demonstrate its connection. On the contrary, you're now causing it, you're forcing it to deny it. It's like you're holding a gun to its head and you're saying, say that you have no connection to God. Okay, that's a little dramatic, but like, that's kind of what's happening. When we engage in something, not for the sake of heaven, what we're doing is we're saying, see, you have no connection, right? There's no higher purpose here, right? I don't know. I don't have, I can't eat, like I can't,
So where's the enjoyment? Everything's restricted.
you can enjoy, we'll talk about enjoyment soon. There is enjoyment, but it's a higher level enjoyment. It's enjoyment for the sake of something higher. We'll see. I think he's going to circle back to it. If not, we'll get back to it. The same applies to business affairs. We mentioned before food and business, and now he leaned into food. Now he's going into business. One's intention should be to earn a living, so that his mind and heart are free to be involved in Torah study and prayer, and so that he can perform mitzvot such as charity. Right? Look what he says. Business can also be done from a connected space or a disconnected space. What's the connected space? If I work and I earn money, great. I'm not going to be worried about existential things, and therefore I'll have the opportunity. In other words, I won't be worried about survival. I'll have the opportunity. What was it? Was it Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Right? I'll have my basic needs taken care of, so I can think about it. I have the headspace to study Torah, headspace to do mitzvot, headspace to do all these things, and then literally I can give tzedakah. Consequently, he will conduct his business affairs in a manner that neither distracts from nor interferes with his Torah study and prayer. In other words, if my intention is it's all connected with spirituality, then it will never contradict my spirituality. Imagine somebody says, I would love to study Torah. I would love to pray, but I can't. I have to earn money. 1 second. Why are you earning money in the first place? Isn't that only for the higher stuff? So if the business is connected with spirituality, then it will never become a contradiction to spirituality, because that's its very purpose. All right, all of the above is attained through contemplation, pondering well until it becomes true to him how godliness is the primary element of existence, while the physical element in and of itself is veritable not and nothingness. Then the aforementioned love is awakened in accordance with what was explained above. In other words, once we have that in our heads, that everything has a body and a soul, and the soul is always primary because it's what drives the body. Once I have that clear in my head, then everything else falls into place. That's what I'll want. That's what I'll relate to. When I eat, I'm going to focus on that. When I do business, I'm going to focus on that. And everything, life changes for the better. All right, 58. We're going to go quickly. We have, what do we have here? Yeah, we have just 2 pages. All right, here we go, 58. And through this contemplation and the resultant love of God, a person's equal inclination, natural character traits, which otherwise desire and long for material things in their essential material state, will abate. In other words, my Yetzer Hara, my natural character traits, physical natural character traits, that typically want things, they want to objectify things just for the physical material thing and not for the deeper purpose. But the more I contemplate the truth, and the more I feel that connection with God, with spirituality, the more that calms down. The above mentioned contemplation and love subordinates one's natural character traits, so they no longer desire the physical, but only the spiritual. And this, of course, is the meaning, as he'll say in a moment, of loving Hashem b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. Even my animal soul, even my Yetzer Hara, even my evil inclination can learn to love God, because even that can realize through enough seichel, through enough thinking, that the physical is what? Here today, gone tomorrow. With all your heart and soul. In truth, the animal soul and evil inclination also understand that one ought not to want the physical elements, since they are essentially death, as the primary element of existence is the godly life force. It is therefore logical to desire the primary, not the secondary. In truth, it's not even possible to call the physical secondary. For in essence, it is, as we just said, not and nothingness. In other words, it doesn't even exist. The moment the soul separates from the body, it's not like, well, at least you have a body. That disintegrates. That decays in the ground, right?
So,
That's also not. So like, it's not even secondary. It's beneath secondary. There's truth and there's what's not true. And what's truth is godliness, spiritual energy. That's the truth of us and of the world around us. And so that's something that logically, even the evil inclination can understand. Even the body can understand that, its own mortality. In other words, back inside, through this contemplation, the animal soul's natural traits are also weakened to the point where they are also where they also come to love God, to desire the godliness within everything and not the physical thing itself. And since one desires the godliness of material objects, he will not be drawn after things that are superfluous to him, like we said before, things that serve only to satiate the desires of his animal soul. Rather, he will seek only those things that are compulsory for his existence to enable him to serve God. And here we address, Linda, your question. At times, one must enjoy physical pleasures, i.e., when there's a mitzvah to do so, like on Shabbat and festivals. All right, at least we got that, right? When there's a mitzvah to derive pleasure by eating and drinking. And even then, one should obtain enjoyment from the mitzvah, but not from the object of pleasure itself. So there you go. So it says, so there is a space for pleasure, but it's pleasure in the context of the mitzvah, not necessarily from the physical itself. I know. This is taking all the fun out of Instagram and all the fun out of food blogging and all the fun out of cooking and all the fun out of this. But the truth is, I don't see it as a huge contradiction. I think that, like with everything, there's like an extreme way, and then there's like a more practical application of it. I think the practical application of it is, as we cook, let's say a beautiful Shabbat dinner, right? And as we cook a dinner and invite, etc., the intention is, it's lekavod Shabbat, oneg Shabbat. It's for the pleasure, for the enjoyment of Shabbat. It's to bring people together, family and friends. Or if I have, right, a good breakfast, and it stimulates. If I have good wine and the aroma, right, it stimulates my senses, then I will be perhaps sharper. After too much wine, not sharper, but I'll be sharper potentially in my understanding. And this rabbi who said I couldn't answer your question until I had some meat, what he was saying is that for him is a thing. So do you enjoy it? You could enjoy it, but you're enjoying not the physical, you're enjoying what it's doing. You're enjoying the spiritual, in a sense, the purpose of it. Now, similarly, due to the aforementioned love, 2 more paragraphs, so we close it out. One will want godliness to be diffused and revealed throughout the world. Look at that. Just as on account of one's love for one's soul, one wants his own life force to extend throughout the body. He's adding something new. Just like you want to be alive, meaning you want your soul to power every part of your body. You don't like, well, the foot, didn't need it. No, you want your life to be diffused everywhere. So too, if you look at the world as a large body, and God, like our soul, is powering that, you want godly revelation or diffused, you want God to be extended and diffused everywhere throughout the universe. When a person contemplates the godliness as the source of all life, he will likewise be awakened with a kind of love that desires the revelation of godliness. I want to see God everywhere I look. This explains the verse, and here we close it out. This explains the verse, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, b'chal levavcha, which is within the opening line of the main paragraph, the first paragraph of Shema. This refers to a love and yearning, ratzah, for godliness, and a desire for godly revelation. And this love is also felt with all your heart, with both inclinations, as the Talmud says. One's evil inclination is also awakened to this love, as explained above. What we've done over the last, 10 pages, is essentially give a textbook, give a workbook for how to explain logically, even to your own physical mind and your physical heart and temptations. Take it easy. If you really want it, there's a truth, there's what's true and there's what's not true, and you're really running after something that's so temporal, that is of such decay, that is such you want something a little bit deeper, you want something really good. What's really good is the source. So that's what he's saying. You can even get the evil inclination on board, and this is followed, he says, the last line, this is followed by with all your soul, right? B'chol nafshecha, with all your soul, which is the aspect of shav, which is the return. For after the aforementioned ratzo, love, yearning for God, there's a shav, which is bringing God back, which is, we'll speak about this more next week, which is coming back into reality, the revelation of godliness in the person and the world through fulfilling Torah and mitzvot, which is grounding the love. So there's the idea of love, which is a yearning to escape, and then there's the grounding, which is bringing it back in reality. So yes, I can want God, I can want to find God in everything, but then when I do a mitzvah, I actually connect with God in the things that I'm doing. Again, we'll focus on that a little bit more, the duality of ratzon and shuv, of running and returning. We'll talk about that a little bit next week, but I don't want to lose the main plot. The main point of today, which is really the culmination of weeks and weeks of conversation, is that we have a choice. You can look at things superficially. We can look at the world superficially. We can look at people superficially, like you said, Toba, right? We can look at things superficially and say, all I see is a body. All I see is a table. All I see is a bagel. All I see is the outside. We can see that. We can choose to see that. Or we can choose to start thinking a little bit deeper and say, one second, let me start with myself. Am I just a body? I'm not just a body. What does it mean I'm just a body? Body doesn't do anything without a soul. Not only am I not just a body, I'm not even a body. Like the body is nothing, as he said. It's not a nothingness. Ayin ve'efes. It's like, it's nothing. It's garnished. It's like the body is nothing without a soul. It's not only secondary. It's like the glove in the hand, right? The glove sits on the table. A body without a soul disappears. It doesn't even exist. And so the main thing is the soul. So I begin contemplating, what's the main thing for me? What's the primary for me? Who am I? I'm a body, I'm a soul. One second. So if I'm a soul, maybe everything around me is a soul. Maybe you're also a soul, primarily, with a body in the outside. Maybe the bagel is also a soul encased in a bagel, right? Encased in an outside. Everything around me, business also, is purpose inside a formal structure on the outside. Everything has a purpose. And suddenly I'm thinking, well, one second. I revere my life, which is my soul. Let me have the same reverence the world within the world around me. Let me treat the bagel as a divine spark. Let me treat work as a divine opportunity. Let me focus less on the materialism of it and more on the purpose of it. It's a transformation, a complete transformation. And it not only does it transform the way we relate to things for its benefit, I would say one of the greatest benefits for ourselves, giving ourselves a sense of meaning and purpose. We had this conversation last week, right? Someone asked, I have a conference, it seems so meaningless. He didn't, I'm paraphrasing. When you have this perspective, eating is valuable. Work is valuable. Everything is valuable, not because of a life of superficiality, a life of external is ultimately feels the worst. I spent all these hours for what? For something that's here now and gone in a few hours? I spent so much time for something that's gone? Or am I investing in something? Hey guys, right? That would be amazing if there was one thread that ran through everything. And there can be, and there is, if we choose to see it. Thank you very much. Hey, David. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Hope this made sense. Next week, we begin chapter 3 of our text, The Power of Return. So please come back. Please return for the power of return. And next week. All right, let me acknowledge everybody here. David, Ellen, Shoshi, Helen, Sandrine, Renata, Nate, and Frank. It's great to see you all. And of course, everybody here. Guys, I have a few big announcements. Hold on, before we do questions, I have some big announcements. Number one, I sent out only one email about this, and I'll send out another one tomorrow. We have what I'm calling colloquially the beer shear. The beer shear. This is a class lecture on beer. We have with us, somebody is traveling to Georgia, to Atlanta. He is one of the chief rabbis of the OK kosher certification. He does big plants, big factories here in Georgia. So he has agreed to come and talk about some of the challenges and some of the things to look out for when buying beer. So many of us, I mean, even if we're not like, beer, whatever, aficionados, but we'll drink a beer. The question is, well, hold on, what do we need to look for to make sure that the beer is kosher? A lot of the new craft beers and the smaller breweries are experimenting with a lot of things that that would make your bubby cringe. So let's just put it that way. So here's going to be a guide for what to look for, which craft breweries are okay, which are a little bit more questionable. So Kosher on Tap, navigating the kashrus complexities of modern brewing. Oh, and we're also having a beer tasting along with the discussion that is tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Wednesday night, we have Unraveling the Mysteries of Life. I feel like we talked about this for a while, but everybody should join us. One of the top scientists in the world today will be joining us from Washington, D.C. He'll be here live. He works for one of the directors of the NIH, National Institutes of Health. He is the head of the Human Genome Institute. And he's going to be speaking about the incredible accomplishment of sequencing the human genome, the entire human DNA, and the opportunities that this holds for health and wellness moving forward, and how it affects the Jewish community. So that is all happening Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. We have a catered cocktail hour. EB Catering is catering food and drink open bar. Join us from 7 to 8 as the socialized schmoozing and eating. 8 p.m. the program and lecture begins. It's going to be amazing. Literally amazing. Tell your friends you don't want to miss this. There's no charge to attend. All right. Any questions or comments? You're welcome. Guys, take a bagel to go. There's so much. Yes, you have to. And if you don't, then feel the guilt. I'm kidding. None of us, by the way, I should have probably mentioned, we're never going to be perfect with all this. The goal is to give us a bit of a higher meditation so that have their truth, and everybody stay safe. Watch out for that black ice.
Hey,
On
Rabbi.
the door. The students.
Let's see, what's that? Oh, somebody was sliding? Oh, they were sliding on purpose. Okay. Oh, they were actually sliding. Oh my gosh. All right. Good. All right. We'll see you guys. All right.
Rabbi.
I'm with you here on Zoom. Ellen, you had a question? David, I'll get to you in 1 second. Yeah.
All right. Does that mean that if we have a plant and it's an ugly plant, we want to get rid of it,
Yeah.
we should not water it anymore and let it die, or we should throw it in the garbage? We cannot do that. We shouldn't do that. We are killing a living thing.
You know what?
Viewed with Hashem.
You're asking a good question. Is there the same prohibition taking a life of a plant as there is taking a life of other forms of life? When it comes to humans, obviously it's not okay. When it comes to animals, also it's not okay. Unless you're eating, there's a provision for eating, and that's the only provision, right? Hunting is not necessarily a question about plants. I haven't seen the prohibition. I think it's more of a sensitivity. Based on everything that we learn, if we're being sensitive, then we're not going to do it. I don't know that it violates. I mean, it may violate Bal Tashkit. No, it does violate that, actually. The Torah says if you're in war against a nation and you're besieging the enemy, don't cut down fruit trees. You're asking about a tree about a plant that's ugly they don't like. Again, I don't think there's a formal prohibition, but I think there's a sensitivity. But if it's for beautification, there might be. I don't know. I don't know that there's a prohibition against it.
I mean, even
David.
I'd have another one.
1 second. Let's go. Let's give David a shot.
Rabbi, first,
David, yeah, here you go.
I apologize because I'm not sure that I know how to articulate my question, and it may come out wrong. But so the idea that the things that are around us, including the things that we ingest to energize us, have a spark in them. Are all sparks created equal, or are different ingredients and a food, or for example, like a strawberry is sweet and tart, is does that mean it's a special kind of spark that will provide a special kind of energy when we release it? Does that make sense?
Food comes from tohu, from that higher primordial world, with a lot of energy in it. That's in general. But specifically, it says in Kabbalah that like an apple, which is sweet, comes from the energy of chesed. Of tohu, it comes from chesed, which means that it is that's what creates the sweetness. Whereas something tart or something sour would come from gevura, which is a little bit more sharp. So there is a specificity. I haven't really seen it broken down beyond that, beyond kind of like the chesed gevura duality, which are the two primary midos, the two primary emotive energies and of the sphirot and also within us. So that's kind of like that. That's a divide that I've seen between, kind of sweet and spicy. But I certainly.
So if we're feeling low and chesed, then eat something more sweet.
So that's the
Maybe.
thing, right? So I haven't seen that advice clear. Like I haven't seen that, but it does say, it's like, I'll tell you the story. The story is that one of the, I forget the exact details of this of the background of the story, but one Rebbe said to his son, maybe they were throwing candies for like a simcha or mitzvah or something, or another occasion, maybe because the child was being brought to school for the first time. And so they also did some candy throwing. And he said that it's the angels, it's Malach Michal that's throwing the candies. The angel Michal is throwing the candies. So our Rebbe asked the question, what is this, a Baba Maisa? The angel threw candies? Like, what does that even mean? He says, no. The angel Michal is symbolic of chesed, and candy is sweet. Everything that's sweet is coming from chesed. So there's a clear, and it speaks specifically in Kabbalah about the sweetness of an apple, assuming that the apple is sweet, that's coming from a direct line from chesed. It's used as an example of how physical things have a spiritual source, and in the spiritual source, it looks very different than the physical thing. But even in language, we'll say something like, when somebody holds a door for us, we'll say, oh, that was so sweet. It doesn't mean that the taste is sweet. It means that it was a kind act, ayikes. So we'll, even in English and even in intuitive human interaction, we'll use these types of terms, right? Or you'll say that somebody who's angry is a bitter person. What? We licked them? No, we didn't. Like, they're bitter in the sense, right? It's more conceptual. And so in a sense, we intuitively use this in language, and we know this to be true. And it's like almost we take it for granted, but we don't always think about what we're actually doing and saying. It's kind of cool if you think about it. And so that's what I've seen. I haven't seen, though, to your direct question of like, if you're feeling like if you need a little bit of a chesed boost, try this. Here's a shot of something sweet. Although, maybe, in other words, if you follow the logic, perhaps. But I can't be. I don't feel comfortable saying definitively yes, because I just haven't seen it. But what I have seen is what I've told you, that obviously everything physical comes from a spiritual source, and everything food specifically has a very powerful divine energy, and there is this chesed gevura duality with regards to food.
Thank you.
And by the way, it's so interesting. You wouldn't know it so far in our text, because it's like our text, like what we're studying here, right? This book is playing the long game. So there's a big arc here. But ultimately, this book is about getting to explore the power of gevura, not chesed. It's interesting, the power of gevura. And that's going to be the ultimate arc. And that's why God wanted to create the world originally with midat hadin, with the attribute of justice, and why it says in the beginning, Elohim created. Elohim is the name of judgment and justice and gevura, etc. That we're going to get, we're not there yet, but that's going to be ultimately where we get to. And it also says that as good as sweet is, something with a little bit of bite to it, flavor, like in flavor-wise, is something that challenges the palate is ultimately, for most people, better. Like like a kid appreciates something sweet, but it takes like a bit, it's a maturity to appreciate something a little bit more tangy, a little bit more spicy. But ultimately, that's like that really like gets us going, and that's what gets God going also, that gevura. But again, that's like the long game. So there are a lot of connections with the flavors, but I don't know that I can definitively say that that's good advice to do that, but it's probably not bad advice. It's probably not far off. Anyway, all right, good. David, good to see you. Dr. David, good
too.
to see you. Good to
Bye
see you.
bye. Have a great week,
All right.
everybody.
We'll see you. We'll see you. Ellen, we'll see you tomorrow, perhaps.
Hopefully, yes, I plan. I would have come this morning, but I was afraid that there might have been ice on the
Black
road.
ice. No, makes sense. David, if you're around Wednesday, would love for you to join this thing if you can make it. I don't know if the timing works.
Yeah, I think timing is a little late. Getting up at 4.
Right. Oof.
Yeah, that gets
Indeed.
kind of rough.
It
So
does. Okay. All
I
right.
did send you a text earlier if you want to take a peek at it.
Didn't
So,
hold on.
yeah,
Let's see.
it was a late start for a text.
Oh, of course. Oh my gosh, I didn't see this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we didn't have a chance to mention it, but so first of all, I'm sorry to hear this. Wow. Okay. Can I call you soon?
Sure.
All right, I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna call you once we wrap here. Okay, I'll call you to discuss. All right. Okay. All right, Ellen, David, and I'm not sure who else is on, but we'll see you guys.
I had another little question.
Yeah, Ellen, jump
I don't
in.
know how pertinent it is, but in
Sure.
terms of having what we need and wanting more. So if we have enough clothes to wear, but we see something we really want, or even a rich man, he has a yacht or a
Right.
car, he wants more cars
Mm.
or more yachts. That's,
You're asking a very good question. You're asking a very good question. There is something to be
we
said
always
about.
want more. So we not buy it, not get it because we don't need it. We want it.
It's superfluous, right? You're saying, well, if it's extra, then maybe it should, maybe it's off the limits. I think like this. I think that when it comes to these things, if it can enhance our, something spiritual, then there's a reason and there's a virtue for it. If not, then we have to ask the question: what's the purpose? What's the utility of it? In other words, if the clothes are going to help us feel good and to help us, shine our best self and show up and do what we need to do, then there might be an argument that it's a good thing. If there's some nicer food at the Shabbat dinner and people get excited about it, if it's beautiful house that people that can come over and do an event, host it, these are things that have utility. If it's I don't know, it's a hard question to answer, and I don't know who's going to draw that line.
Because it's
but it's
beautiful, because it strikes my fancy. But I don't need it.
Right. If it can enhance us spiritually, then there might be value. If not, then we should probably think about it a little bit more closely. That's probably the best. It's a good question, though. It's a very good question. All right. Always love speaking with you and exploring these things. Good to see you. David, I'll call you now.
Okay.
Good to see you guys. All right. See you soon.